I watched a child sit completely still for 40 minutes in a packed, noisy waiting room, and I have never felt so unsettled in my life. Not because something was wrong with him, because everything was right. He was maybe 2.5, 3 years old at most. Tiny sneakers not quite reaching the floor. People bumping past, a TV blaring in the corner, someone's phone ringing every few minutes. And this kid just sat there, hands in his lap, eyes moving calmly around the room like he was watching clouds. No fidgeting, no whining, no pulling at his dad's sleeve. Just this quiet, steady presence that felt almost out of place in a room full of stressed adults who couldn't even sit still themselves. I remember thinking, okay, that child is just unusually calm by nature. Some kids are just like that. And then I went home that same afternoon and watched my neighbor's little boy absolutely lose it in the driveway because his sandwich had been cut into rectangles instead of triangles. Full collapse. Red face, tears streaming, the whole thing. Same age as the kid in the waiting room. Different universe entirely. I stood there with a coffee going cold in my hand, watching this meltdown unfold over bread geometry. And something in my brain just clicked. This is not about personality. This is not about one kid being easygoing and another being dramatic. There is something else going on here. Something in how these two children move through their days. Something in the air around them. Something invisible that produces two completely different nervous systems inside two completely identical little bodies. That question sat with me for weeks. I kept coming back to it. And the more I looked into it, the more I talked to people, the more I read, the more I realized the answer had nothing to do with the children at all. It had everything to do with what was happening around them, quietly, consistently, every single day, long before any meltdown ever had a chance to start. The difference between those two kids wasn't temperament, it was architecture. The daily architecture of safety that one child lived inside and the other one simply didn't have. And once I understood what that architecture actually looked like, I could not unsee it. It changed how I watched every child I came across. It changed how I thought about my own mornings, my own rhythms, my own quietly chaotic days. I'm going to walk you through exactly what I found, because I think it's going to shift something for you, too. If this kind of content helps you think differently about the little people in your life, please subscribe and leave a like. It genuinely helps more people find these conversations. And honestly, this is one worth sharing. Because here is the thing that took me a long time to sit with. The moment your child starts melting down, the moment the screaming starts, the moment the floor becomes their natural habitat, that moment is not the problem. That moment is the invoice arriving for everything that happened in the 3 or 4 hours before it. And most of us, when the invoice arrives, we scramble, we negotiate, we bribe, we get frustrated, we try the calm voice, then the firm voice, then the voice that sounds nothing like us at all. We throw every tool we have at a situation that stopped being fixable roughly 2 hours ago. I used to do the exact same thing. I remember standing in a supermarket checkout line with my friend Sarah and her daughter Emma, watching Sarah try to de-escalate a meltdown that had been building since before they even left the house. Emma had woken up late. Breakfast was rushed and different from usual. The car ride over was loud and hurried. By the time they hit the checkout line and the little chocolate bar on the shelf became the most important object in the universe, it was already over. The cup was already full. That chocolate bar was just the last drop. Sarah looked at me afterward, exhausted, and said, "I don't know what sets her off anymore. It's always something random." And I understood exactly what she meant, because I had heard that same sentence from so many parents. It's always something random. But it's not random. It never was. The randomness is just what it looks like when you're only watching the final 30 seconds of a story that started hours earlier. The meltdown is the last page. Most parents only ever read the last page and then wonder why the story doesn't make sense. What I want to show you is how to read the whole thing from the beginning. Because once you do, the ending stops surprising you entirely. The most dangerous parenting advice I ever heard came from someone who meant incredibly well, and it nearly convinced me to keep doing everything wrong. I was talking to a friend of mine, a guy named David, father of two, someone I genuinely respect. And I was telling him about what I had been thinking, about the cup filling up, about the hours before the meltdown being where the real story lives. And he looked at me, nodded slowly, and said, "Yeah, but you just have to get better at handling it when it happens. Ride it out, stay calm, redirect. That is the job." And the thing is, he is not wrong about any individual piece of that. Staying calm matters. Redirecting works sometimes. Riding it out is sometimes the only option left. But the whole frame of that advice, the whole architecture of it, is built around one invisible assumption: that the meltdown is a given. That it is just a thing that happens, like weather, like rain, and your only job is to have a good umbrella. I sat with that for a long time, because I had been asking the same question David was asking. How do I handle this better when it starts? And what I slowly realized is that question, that specific question, is actually a trap. It sounds like a reasonable, responsible, caring question. It sounds like the question a good parent asks. But underneath it is a belief that the explosion is inevitable, that the best you can do is manage the damage. And once I saw that belief sitting there, quietly running the whole show, I could not unsee it. The better question, the one that changed everything for me, is this: what is the day doing to this child before anything goes wrong? Not what is the child doing, what is the day doing? Because a toddler does not experience Tuesday the way you do. They do not have context. They do not have the ability to tell themselves, "Okay, this morning was chaotic, but it will settle down by afternoon." Their nervous system is reading every single input, every noise, every surprise, every rushed goodbye, every skipped nap, every unfamiliar meal, and it is logging all of it, filing it, stacking it. And it does not ask permission before it tips. That shift from "how do I handle the meltdown" to "what is the day building toward?" that is not a small adjustment. That is a completely different operating system. And the parents I have seen make that shift fully and consistently are the ones whose kids start to look like that little boy in the waiting room: steady, calm, carrying something solid inside them that the noise of the world just cannot seem to shake. So if you have been working hard on your reactions, on your tone, on your strategies for the moment things fall apart, I am not saying that work is useless. I am saying it is the second chapter. And most of us have been trying to read it without ever opening chapter 1. Now, here is where it gets genuinely interesting and a little uncomfortable, because this next piece reframes something most parents think they already understand. A meltdown is not a behavior. That sentence sounds simple, but it lands differently the longer you sit with it. When we call it a behavior, we are already treating it like a choice, like something the child is doing, like something that can be corrected or trained or disciplined away. But a meltdown is not a choice. It is a physical event. It is what happens inside a small body when the load it has been quietly carrying all day finally exceeds what it can hold. Think about it this way. Imagine you have been carrying a backpack all day, and someone keeps adding small things to it without telling you. A heavy textbook in the morning, a water bottle at noon, a pair of shoes after lunch. Each one individually feels manageable. But by mid-afternoon, your shoulders are aching and your posture is off, and you are irritable in a way you cannot quite explain. And then someone asks you to carry one more small thing, something genuinely light, something that on any other day would be nothing. And you snap. You put the whole backpack down on the floor, and you are done. That is the meltdown. The last item was not the problem. The backpack was the problem. The accumulation was the problem. And the wild thing is, most of us know this about ourselves as adults. We know what it feels like to have a day that loads us up until we have nothing left. We call it being overwhelmed. We give ourselves permission to feel it. But when a 3-year-old hits the exact same wall, we call it a tantrum, and we look for a strategy to stop it. The child is not performing. The child is not manipulating. The child is telling you, in the only language their body knows, that the backpack got too heavy. And the answer is not a better way to respond when they drop it. The answer is to stop putting so much in the backpack in the first place. And that, right there, is where the 3 practices live. Not in the meltdown, in the backpack. In what fills it and what empties it, and how that invisible weight moves through an ordinary day in ways most parents have never once stopped to notice. The first practice sounds so boring that most parents dismiss it before they even try it, and that single decision costs them months of unnecessary chaos. I know because I dismissed it too. When I first started understanding what actually sits underneath a toddler's nervous system, the very first thing that kept coming up was this idea of the predictable day. And my immediate reaction was, okay, sure, routine. I have heard this before. Next. Because it sounds like the most obvious, most recycled piece of parenting advice in existence. Wake them at the same time, put them to bed at the same time. Great, thank you, very helpful. I thought I already knew this. I thought most parents already knew this. But knowing something and actually understanding why it works are 2 completely different things. And once I understood the why, the whole thing stopped sounding boring and started sounding almost urgent. Here is what I mean. A toddler's brain is not a small adult brain. It is something genuinely different. It is a brain that is still in the middle of building its most basic ability, which is the ability to predict what comes next. That is not a small thing. That is actually the brain's #1 job at that age. Not learning colors, not learning words, predicting the world. Because a world that can be predicted is a world that is safe. And a world that feels safe is a world where the nervous system can finally exhale. When the day is consistent, when breakfast has a familiar smell and a familiar shape, when the afternoon follows a rhythm the child has felt before, their brain is not working hard. It already knows. And all that energy that would have gone into figuring out what comes next gets redirected somewhere else entirely, into curiosity, into play, into the kind of deep, absorbed, quiet focus that makes a child look almost meditative from the outside. But when the day is unpredictable, when Monday feels nothing like Sunday, when the morning is rushed and loud and different from yesterday, that brain never stops working. It is scanning constantly, reading faces, listening to tones of voice, trying to figure out the shape of the day from whatever small clues it can find. And that is exhausting. That is genuinely, physically exhausting for a small body. And an exhausted nervous system does not need a big trigger to collapse. It just needs one more thing. Anything. I think about a child I know named Oliver. His mom, a woman named Claire, is one of the most loving, present, genuinely devoted parents I have ever met. She is also someone who values spontaneity, different activities each day, surprise outings, flexible meal times. She always described it as keeping things fresh for him. And Oliver, for the first 3 years of his life, was a child who fell apart almost daily. Not because Claire was doing anything wrong in the obvious sense, but because every single day, Oliver's brain was working overtime just to figure out where he was in time. Every day was a puzzle he had to solve from scratch. And puzzles are fun until they are not. Until you are 3 years old and exhausted, and the puzzle never stops. The shift happened quietly. Claire started anchoring just the mornings. Same wake time, same breakfast, same small sequence of getting dressed, shoes by the door, a specific song she always hummed while she made his toast. She did not change the whole day, just the beginning of it. And within about 10 days, something in Oliver changed. He started waking up without that edge of anxiety that had become so normal she had stopped noticing it. He started eating his breakfast without getting up 4 times. He stopped crying when it was time to leave for the day, something that had been a daily battle for months. The beginning of the day was now solid ground. And solid ground at the start means the whole day has somewhere to stand. That is what predictability actually gives a child. Not boredom, not rigidity, a foundation. The kind of quiet, invisible foundation that lets everything else be a little more flexible, without the whole structure crumbling. And here is the thing that Claire told me later, the thing that really stayed with me. She said the mornings used to feel like damage control from the very first minute. Now they feel like something she actually looks forward to. The same small ritual, the same song, the same little moment of calm before the day opens up. She said it stopped feeling like routine and started feeling like something they both needed. Something that belonged to just the two of them. That is the first practice. Not a schedule, not a rigid system. Just 1 or 2 anchor points that make the shape of the day recognizable to a child who is still learning how time works. But here is where it gets complicated. Because even the most beautifully predictable day has moments built into it that can undo everything in about 30 seconds flat. There is one moment in every single day that destroys more toddler calm than anything else. And almost every parent I know handles it in exactly the wrong way without even realizing it. I am talking about transitions. The move from one thing to the next. Stopping play to come to dinner. Leaving a place they love. Putting down a toy to get in the bath. These moments sound trivial when you list them out like that. They sound like nothing. And that is precisely the problem. Because to an adult, they are nothing. And to a toddler, they are everything. I want to tell you about a specific afternoon I witnessed, because it changed the way I understood this completely. I was at a playground with my friend Mike and his son Leo, who was just under 3 at the time. Leo had been playing in the sandpit for about 40 minutes. He was deep in it, fully absorbed, building something complicated with a plastic cup and a stick he had found. His whole body was in it, shoulders forward, tongue slightly out, completely gone from the world around him. And then Mike stood up, brushed the back of his jeans, and said, "Okay, buddy, time to go." Leo did not move. Mike said it again, a little louder. "Leo, come on, we're leaving." And within about 20 seconds, Leo was on his back in the sand, screaming, legs going, the whole thing. And Mike looked at me with that specific, exhausted look that every parent of a toddler knows. The look that says, I have no idea what just happened. But I did know. And it had nothing to do with Leo being difficult. What happened was that Mike had reached into a world Leo was completely living inside and yanked him out of it, with no warning, no signal, no time to mentally close the door on what he was doing. 1 second, Leo existed in a universe of sand and sticks and quiet focus. The next second, that universe was just gone, replaced by a parking lot and a car seat and a destination he did not choose. For a small child whose brain is not yet built to switch gears quickly, that is genuinely shocking. Not metaphorically, physically shocking to the nervous system. The second practice is about solving exactly this. And it is so simple that the first time I explain it to parents, they almost always say, "That is it. That cannot actually be it." But it is. Before every single transition in your child's day, you warn them. Not from across the room, not while you are putting your coat on. You get down to their level, you make eye contact, and you tell them calmly that a change is coming. You give them a few minutes, then you come back and remind them again. And one more time just before it happens. That is the whole practice. But the mechanism behind it is what makes it so powerful. When a child knows a transition is coming, their brain has time to start wrapping up, to mentally finish what it is doing, to begin releasing the current activity before being pulled from it. The shift stops being a shock and becomes something expected, something survivable. And a nervous system that is not shocked does not collapse. I watched Mike try this the very next time we were at that same playground, about 2 weeks later. He set a gentle reminder, crouched down next to Leo, made eye contact, and said quietly, "In a few minutes, we are going to pack up and head home." Leo barely looked up from what he was doing. He just made a small sound and kept playing. 2 minutes later, Mike came back. "Almost time, buddy." And again, just before they left. "Okay, last minute, then we go." And Leo stood up, brushed the sand off his knees, picked up his cup, and walked to the gate. I genuinely could not believe I was watching the same child. Mike looked at me like he had discovered something slightly unreal. And in a way, he had. Because the meltdown was never about leaving. It was always about being given no time to leave. Now the predictable day gives the child a safe container. The transition warning protects the fragile moments inside that container. But there is a third practice, and this one is the one that surprises people most, because it asks you to do something that goes completely against the way most of us think about being a good, engaged, present parent. There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep, and most parents carry it without ever naming it. And their children carry it too. And it is this invisible weight that the third practice is designed to lift completely. Think about what a typical day actually looks like for a toddler in a household that is trying hard. Morning starts with interaction, questions, songs, maybe a learning activity. Then an outing, stimulation, social contact, noise. Then lunch with conversation. Then an activity. Then screen time that is loud and colorful and fast-moving. Then an educational game. Then bath time with songs and games. Then a story. Then bed. Every single block of that day has something happening in it. Every single moment has input arriving. And the child is absorbing all of it, processing all of it, with a nervous system that has been running at full capacity since the moment they open their eyes. I think about a woman named Rachel, someone I got to know through a mutual friend, who described her daughter Mia as a child who was loved so hard she never got a second to breathe. Rachel was the kind of parent who filled every moment with intention. Every car ride had a podcast for kids. Every meal had a conversation about the day. Every quiet moment made her slightly anxious, like she was failing Mia by not enriching her. And Mia, by late afternoon every single day, was completely undone. Tears over nothing, frustration at everything. A body that had simply run out of capacity to handle one more input, no matter how loving that input was. What Rachel was missing was not effort. She had more than enough effort. What she was missing was the understanding that a toddler's nervous system is not designed to receive input continuously without a break. It needs moments of genuine emptiness to sort through what it has already taken in. Not sleep, not rest in the passive sense, just stillness, just quiet, just time where nothing new is being offered and nothing is being asked. The third practice is building those moments deliberately into the day, not as a last resort when things fall apart, as a planned, protected, non-negotiable part of the day. Just sitting together in a quiet room. No music, no screens, no questions, no teaching. Just existing in the same space without agenda. And the wild thing, The thing that shocked Rachel when she first tried it is that Mia did not get bored. She did not climb the walls. She settled. Within a few minutes of that quiet beginning, Mia started doing things on her own, quietly lining up small toys, looking at the light on the wall, just breathing. And Rachel said she watched her daughter's shoulders drop about an inch, like something she had been holding all day finally let go. That drop is what you are looking for. That is the nervous system finding its floor. And a child who finds their floor regularly during the day is a child who almost never needs to find the ceiling. Most parents who try one of these practices see a change within a few days, and then quietly abandon it within 2 weeks. And the reason why is something nobody talks about honestly enough. It is not because the practices stop working. It is because the practices start working so well that the parent stops feeling the urgency that made them start in the first place. The crisis fades, the mornings get easier, the transitions stop being battles, and somewhere in that relief, the intentionality slips. The anchor routine gets skipped once, then twice. The warning before leaving gets forgotten in a rushed afternoon. The quiet window gets filled back up with something. And then, slowly, almost invisibly, the backpack starts filling up again. I watched this happen with Claire, the mother I told you about earlier, the one who anchored Oliver's mornings and changed everything. About 6 weeks after that shift, she told me things had gotten hard again. Not as hard as before, but harder than they had been. And when I asked her what the mornings looked like now, she paused and said, "Honestly, we have been all over the place lately. Life got busy. I think I stopped doing the thing." She had not failed. She had just forgotten what the thing was actually doing. She had started experiencing the results without maintaining the cause. And that is the most important thing I want to say about all 3 of these practices taken together, because individually, each one does something real and specific. The predictable day builds a foundation of safety that the child's brain can finally rest on. The transition warning protects the vulnerable moments where that safety is most likely to crack. And the stillness practice gives the nervous system somewhere to drain the accumulated weight of the day before it reaches the point of overflow. But the reason all 3 work together as something bigger than the sum of their parts is because they are all saying the same thing to the child. They are all communicating one message, quietly and consistently, through the fabric of the day. The message is, "I see you. I have thought about you. I have structured this day with you in mind." And that message, received by a small nervous system that is still learning whether the world is safe, is one of the most settling things a child can feel. Not a perfect day, not a parent who never makes mistakes, just a day that feels like someone planned it with them in mind. I think about Leo leaving that playground calmly, brushing sand off his knees. I think about Oliver eating breakfast without that low hum of anxiety underneath everything. I think about Mia's shoulders dropping that inch in the quiet room. None of those moments look dramatic from the outside. None of them would make a good video clip. They were just small, ordinary moments of a child feeling okay. But that okayness, built consistently over days and weeks, is what actually changes a child's baseline. It raises the floor of what they can handle. It means that when something does go wrong, when the day does surprise them, they have reserves. They have something to draw on instead of nothing left to give. And here is the part that surprised me most when I finally sat with all of this properly. These 3 practices do not just change the child, they change the parent too. Because when you are no longer spending your energy firefighting, when you are not bracing for the next meltdown, when the morning actually goes the way you hoped it would, something loosens in you as well. You start showing up to your child slightly less armored, slightly less tense, and children feel that in a way that is almost physical. A parent who is not waiting for things to go wrong is a parent whose presence feels genuinely safe. And a child in the presence of that kind of safety can breathe in a way they simply cannot when the air is full of tension neither of you chose. That is the whole thing. That is what connects Oliver and Leo and Mia and every other child I have described. Not a technique, not a method. A relationship between a child and their day that makes them feel held before anything has even gone wrong. So let me leave you with where all of this actually lands, because there is a truth underneath everything I have talked about that I want to say as plainly as I can. We live in a parenting culture that is obsessed with responses. How do you respond to the tantrum? How do you respond to the behavior? How do you respond in the moment? And there is an entire industry built around giving parents better and better responses, better scripts, better strategies, better tools for the moment of crisis. And almost none of it asks the question that matters most, which is, what kind of day are we building for this child before the crisis ever arrives? A child who melts down is not a difficult child. A child who melts down is a child who has been given a day their nervous system cannot carry. And the moment you start designing the day around that fact, everything shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily and genuinely, and in a way that stays. The 3 practices are not about controlling your child. They are about respecting them. Respecting the fact that their brain is still being built. Respecting the fact that predictability is not boring to them. It is protective. Respecting the fact that silence is not wasted time. It is necessary recovery. Respecting the fact that a 30-second warning before leaving a playground is not a small courtesy. It is the difference between a child who feels seen and a child who feels ambushed by the very people who love them most. You do not need to be a perfect parent. You need to be a parent who thinks about the hours before the hard moment, not just the hard moment itself. That is the shift. That is the whole shift. Now here is the question I want you to sit with, and I genuinely want to know your answer in the comments. Think about the last time your child had a real meltdown. And now think honestly about the 2 or 3 hours before it. What was actually happening in that time? What did the morning look like? What transitions happened without warning? What was the noise level? What got skipped? Because I have asked this question to dozens of parents, and almost every single time, the answer reveals the whole story. The meltdown was never the beginning. It was always the ending of something that started long before anyone noticed. Write it in the comments. I am genuinely reading them. And if something in this video landed for you, if it shifted something or gave you a new way to look at your child's hardest moments, please share it with one parent who needs to hear it tonight. Leave a like so more people can find it. And subscribe, because next time we are going into the specific words that quietly shape a child's confidence every single day, and what to say instead. You do not want to miss that one.